Good evening. It's an honor to be here this evening, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I was a worker and employee of Old Republic Title Company. And
what's the name of it again?
Old Republic Title Company. I was Chief Title Officer and Commercial Title Officer. I was injured on the job in 2006, and then have been off work for the past two years, since 2009. July 2009. So the shop that I worked for was a non-union shop, and one of the things that happens in a non-union shop when a person is injured is there is nobody to advocate for the injured employee. The worker has a packet of information that they're handed. They're told to go to a doctor-in-a-box type location where they process people who are injured on the job, and in my particular case, I had a neck injury that was misdiagnosed. I had some damage to some discs that were not picked up on the x-ray because an x-ray does not take pictures of discs, and I had to wait for 9 months in order to get an MRI. Now, this wouldn't have been so bad in and of itself. I could have coped very well with that if at the same time I was put in a situation where I had an assistant working for me who went to work for another company after I was injured, and I was not given a replacement to help me with my tasks. So I was already working several hours a day overtime without being paid for overtime because our employer decided that they didn't want to pay overtime to people, so we worked for free, which is an entirely another story, but it's also related to this. So after working off the clock for many hours, for many days, I felt that there had to be something wrong with the situation. I was an ignorant person when it comes to labor laws. I went to work, I did my job, I was very proficient in what I did. I enjoyed the work that I did, I enjoyed the people that I worked with, my customers. I didn't like working in pain. I didn't like working overtime without getting paid, but I had in mind that there would be some future benefit to this type of activity. But as the days wore on, as I was traveling down the street at night with a hand cart loaded up with boxes of files that I had to bring home after staying until 11 o'clock on a Friday to finish some files up on the weekend, I said, something has to be wrong with this. So the next week I called the Labor Board, the California Department of Industrial Relations, whose responsibility it is to deal with wage and hour issues. I figured, well, they would know whether or not this type of activity is legal or not. So I called them up and I gave them the situation of our working conditions in my office. And I was told that, well, yes, it sounds like what you're talking about is some illegal overtime that's going on. You can report it for yourself, but you can't report for the other workers in your office because you're not a union shop. That boggled my mind. I mean, if my next door neighbor's house is on fire, it's like telling me I can't report the fire on my neighbor's house because it's not my house. So I said, okay, and I went with the internal company procedure of dealing with issues that come up in the workplace, thinking that somehow I could force the company to not only pay me my back wages, but also pay everybody else their back wages and restore normal hours, working hours to the workplace. I was so foolish. Eventually they handed me a settlement agreement. They told me that it would only apply to me and that everybody else would have to speak up for themselves. Now, to a room full of union people, you could probably find it very difficult to imagine that any person would be willing to work off the clock without getting paid. It seems mind-boggling. But out there in the real world, out there in corporate America, the average worker is expected to fulfill tasks that are being done offshore for half or a third or a tenth of the cost that they're doing them here. So they're compelled to do certain things within the course of a day. They're compelled to get tasks done, close deals, make money. And with this burden upon their shoulders of having to do all these particular tasks to make money for the company, at the end of the day, when they have a pile of work left on our desks, their manager leaves and says, I expect everything to be done in the morning, but you can't get paid overtime. So the worker is left with a dilemma. Do I get all this work done and come in tomorrow morning and have everything fresh and be able to start off my day without stress about all this work on my desk? Or do I just leave it and come back tomorrow and face the consequences? By and large, in the company that I worked for, most people would stay late to work, to get things done, to prepare themselves for the next day, not expecting to be paid. Now in California, this right to be paid, the right to a wage, is a constitutional right that can't be waived. So these people, all this time, from when I reported it 4 years ago to the present, have been amassing a burden of debt that if the company were called to pay them, would bankrupt the company. And that's exactly how they design these situations. Whether you're injured on the job, whether you're not paid your wages, the company you work for in California, more likely than not, is a subsidiary of some Wall Street publicly traded company. Now, these frontline companies, such as the one that I worked for, Old Republic Title Company, is completely owned by somebody who's traded on Wall Street. The company that I worked for had no assets. It was paying rent to a subsidiary of the parent company. The company that I worked for, at the end of every month, if we happened to be in the black, that additional revenue that would be a cushion for future wages or other expenses that might come up, was upstreamed every month to the parent company. So there was never any money to pay people, if something came up. And this sort of attitude of keeping the frontline workers, the people that actually do the work, that produces the income, that profits the parent company, the frontline workers are by and large treated, as they say, like human resources, rather than personnel, rather than human beings working together to achieve a goal. We're looked at as being the equivalent of a mule or a wrench or a compressor, some physical object that can be used for profit. Therefore, in the minds of the corporate parents, the people that make the decisions that have resulted in our current situation, the average person in America is looked at as being nothing. That's why, in the case of an injured worker such as myself, there is really no one within the corporate structure that's willing or interested in helping me to get my workers' compensation benefits in a timely manner or to get my long-term disability payments in a timely manner, because as far as they're concerned, I'm expendable. And I suppose we can all recognize that and live our lives that way, but I think in America we have a better idea of how things should be done. And rather than further bore you with more of the problem, some of the solutions that have occurred to me over the past several months have been, first of all, our agencies that are responsible, and I appreciate to see OSHA here today, but our agencies that are responsible for enforcing laws are by and large underfunded. There is tremendous pressure to shut them down, to shut down the regulators, to stop enforcement. And of course, that'll be all to our common detriment. Americans are being put into situations where they're forced to look at one another, whether they're public employee unions, the rank and file Americans are looking at them as being the cause of our problems because they're demanding so much. I mean, they're only demanding what their contracts assure them of being able to receive. But to the average American who's already been screwed out of everything he has, whose jobs have been sent overseas, these guys who have public pensions coming their way are sitting in the lap of luxury. And of course, people that are public employees that are not sitting in the lap of luxury but are have a tiny pension coming to them when they are finally able to retire, are looking at other people like the folks working in office buildings in San Francisco making $100,000 a year or somebody else making $500,000 a year. But the news is that anybody in this country who is a wage earner right now is in the same boat. I mean, you may have some more zeros on your paycheck than I do. Well, I don't have any paychecks right now, but you may have had more zeros on your paycheck than I have had, or you may not. But in reality, we're all giving our time in exchange for wages that are supposed to come to us. So it's up to the agencies that are in place, federal and state labor departments, the Workers' Compensation Board here in California, Department of Insurance. It's up to these agencies to enforce the laws that are already on the books. And as a means to encourage the enforcement of laws, we have as one tool, and I'll finish with this, and this is not for immediate action or anything like that, but what we need to be thinking about as a nation is to adopt the policies that Europeans have used for many years of engaging in general strikes. Now, we've almost had one here in San Francisco. Now, I'll add that I'm a conservative Republican who's advocating a general strike. That's how serious things are in the real world. But really, that's the only recourse we have. The ballot box, the choices we have are, it's like going to the refrigerator late at night. You just keep opening it up and expecting something else to be there, but it's all the same. I mean, I voted for Barack Obama, and I ended up with Hillary Light. And someone who I expected to be dedicated to making a change for the American worker, who the only time he's spoken up about taxing the rich, other than suggesting that they might be willing to accept more taxes in his State of the Union address, was after President Obama kicked off his 2012 campaign. He then spoke up again about, the rich need to be taxed for their fair share. Well, okay, but let's see some action here, and it's going to take more than taxation. We need to have our jobs brought home, we need to have our laws enforced, and as a people, we need to organize. And like I said, the only way to organize is through strikes. Thank you.